A free society relies on a specific constitutional premise. Citizens must be bound by an objective, external law, rather than the arbitrary will of men. When knowledge of that law is hoarded by a specialized elite, the legal system becomes an instrument of tyranny. Citizens cannot defend themselves against rules they are not permitted to understand. The primary mechanism required to combat this legal monopoly is objective transparency. Under this standard, the actual text of the legal code must be unmediated and immediately accessible to the commoner. This accessibility restrains the power of the judiciary. A judge cannot change the rules of the game during adjudication if the defendant can read the statute themselves. Jewish jurisprudence explicitly recognized this threat to civic freedom from its inception in antiquity. At the termination of his 40-year leadership, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, recognized the necessity of permanently institutionalizing this transparency. For the Israelite nation to enter their land as a free society, they required the execution of a public constitutional safeguard. The geographical execution of this first judicial reform took place in the valley between Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim. The precise physical mandate was to erect towering stone boulders and coat them in pristine white plaster. Scribes then performed the immense labor of painstakingly engraving the entirety of the Torah's legal parameters directly into this hardened surface. This monument served as the unalterable public reference point for all legal disputes. By etching the law into the landscape, this reform bypassed elite mediation. Any citizen, regardless of status or gender, could act as a fully informed legal agent under a unified constitution. Following the destruction of the temple, national sovereignty gave way to the protracted tragedy of exile. The populace experienced a violent shattering, dispersing into fragmented communities across the Mediterranean basin and the Middle East. This physical separation severed the lines of communication back to the centralized rabbinic supreme courts. The immediate diagnosis was one of bare survival. Waves of persecution and constant migration physically exhausted the Jewish communities. The demands of physical survival brushed aside the time required for deep, continuous legal study. Without a central anchor, regional discrepancies in legal rulings began to emerge, threatening the existence of a unified national standard. Consequently, the collective legal fluency of the common citizen began to erode. The geographical and political crisis of the diaspora actively dismantled the constitutional transparency of the nation, making public access to the law impossible. In this environment, the Talmud became the ultimate repository of Jewish oral law. However, it presented a structural barrier. The Talmud relies on complex dialectical scaffolding to present its jurisprudence. This scaffolding forms an endless labyrinth of intense debates, theoretical arguments, and counter-arguments that must be navigated before a conclusion is reached. Furthermore, it erected a linguistic barrier. This dense legal theory was recorded in complex Aramaic, a language that was increasingly foreign to the dispersed Jewish masses. Extracting a final law from the Talmud demanded immense time and years of specialized academic training. The objective law was now trapped behind an intellectual wall. The populace was forced to rely entirely on an elite class of scholars, resurrecting the threat of judicial tyranny. Operating from Fustat, Egypt, the scholar Moses Maimonides diagnosed this systemic constitutional failure. He realized that the original model of public access was dead under diaspora conditions. Maimonides set an audacious objective: to engineer a second judicial reform that would re-democratize the law. His intervention was surgical. He intentionally severed and discarded the complex Talmudic dialectics from the final rulings. He stripped away the endless debates to isolate only the absolute, binding legal conclusions. The resulting masterwork was the Mishneh Torah. The work encompassed the absolute entirety of Jewish law in a 14-volume codex, documenting every statute from civil torts to the intricate details of temple architecture. He executed a deliberate linguistic design, abandoning Aramaic to write the codex in highly accessible Mishnaic Hebrew. Maimonides designed the structure and language so the laws would be immediately clear to both the beginner and the scholar. He claimed that a citizen need only read the written Torah and then this codex to know the full law, requiring absolutely no other text in between them. This design deliberately bypassed the mediating authority of local specialists. The Mishneh Torah was a democratizing mechanism designed to shatter the elite monopoly on legal knowledge and restore constitutional autonomy to the common citizen. This project raised a critical tension. How could a single author claim the authority to finalize 3,000 years of law without citing his contemporary sources? Maimonides relied on strict empirical methodology. In his Responsa, Maimonides proved that his unsourced rulings were the precise conclusions of the Guionic traditions inherited by these Spanish masters. By doing so, he weaponized the methodology of the ancient Babylonian academies to justify every line of his code. Living in Egypt, he gained access to the ancient archives of the Cairo Geniza, providing a direct documentary link to antiquity. He utilized 500-year-old texts, known as Gevalim, to empirically correct the corrupted texts and scribal errors that had infected the diaspora's legal tradition. In Jewish jurisprudence, there is a final rule for any law to become permanently binding on the nation. This constitutional mechanism is known as Peshat B'Kol Yisrael, the requirement that a legal text achieve absolute national consensus and physically spread throughout all of Israel. Because of its empirical accuracy and linguistic clarity, the Mishneh Torah bypassed regional gatekeepers. The speed of its global adoption defied geographic isolation. Copies were simultaneously studied in Yemen, Spain, Provence, and North Africa. This universal acceptance fulfilled the strict constitutional requirement of Peshat B'Kol Yisrael. While other codes focus on regional customs, the Mishneh Torah stands as the only post-Talmudic work to centralize every mandate of the oral tradition into a single, unified structure. For 1,000 years, scholars had ignored laws regarding the sanctuary, the sacrificial systems, and national statecraft because they were inoperative in exile. Maimonides brought these back into the code, shifting the focus from diaspora survival to the legal requirements of a sovereign state. Because of this unbroken consensus, the Mishneh Torah serves as the singular, objective baseline text for modern halakhic study. By restoring objective transparency to the law, Maimonides ensured that the rules governing the nation were no longer the property of a scholarly elite, but a public inheritance available to every citizen.